welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why and how of newspaper reading. Today on 27 November 2018, we complete 1 year of Daily News Simplified videos. In this 1 year, we have tried to provide you one of the most comprehensive news analysis with respect to your current affairs preparation from the Hindu newspaper. So in this aspect, we are also posting a separate video to communicate with you about DNS, its purpose and how it has helped you in preparation of your current affairs, and how a constructive feedback from your side has helped DNS evolve in its incredible journey for the last 1 year. So today, we are going to discuss the Hindu newspaper of 27 November 2018 of the New Delhi edition. Let's start our today's discussion. This news appears on page number 10. The news reads, Notice to center on Anti-graft Act. It says Supreme Court seeks response on NGO's challenge to 2 amendments made in the Prevention of Corruption Act 1988. In your prelims examination, this forms a part of Indian polity and governance, and in your mains, this forms a part of GS paper 2. An NGO, which is Center for Public Interest Litigation, has challenged 2 provisions of amendments made in the Prevention of Corruption Act 1988, and the NGO has challenged these 2 provisions in the Supreme Court of India. Now recently the Parliament had approved Prevention of Corruption Amendment Bill 2018, and through this amendment it sought certain changes in the Prevention of Corruption Act 1988. So it is on this note that CPIL has challenged 2 provisions with respect to Prevention of Corruption Act, and 1 change is introduced through Prevention of Corruption Amendment Bill 2018. The first is with respect to introduction of Section 17A Clause 1 in the Prevention of Corruption Amendment Bill 2018. Now this introduction of Section 17A Clause 1 mandates prior permission from the central government before investigation of corruption cases against any official. Now another provision which has been challenged by this NGO is with respect to the removal of Section 13(1) Clause D subclause 2 of Prevention of Corruption Act 1988. Now this is Section 13 of the Prevention of Corruption Act 1988, which talks about criminal misconduct by a public servant and presents various aspects of criminal misconduct by a public servant. And it is this provision which has been challenged by the NGO in the Supreme Court. It mentions that a public servant is said to commit the offence of criminal misconduct if he, by abusing his position as a public servant, obtains for himself or for any other person any valuable thing or pecuniary advantage. Thus, as per this provision, a public servant is said to commit criminal misconduct if he obtains valuable things or pecuniary advantage both for himself or for any other person. Thus, this provision provided for both direct as well as indirect involvement of a public servant with respect to any criminal misconduct. Hence, it is in this aspect that this NGO has challenged the removal of this particular section under the Prevention of Corruption Act 1988. So on this aspect, let us understand the arguments presented by the petitioner for their grounds of challenge, as these can form a part of your answer with respect to critical analysis of this particular amendment or critical analysis with respect to changes sought in the Prevention of Corruption Act 1988. The petitioners have argued that provision on criminal misconduct were earlier used in most cases to prosecute public officials under the Prevention of Corruption Act 1988. And this provision was even used in such cases where there were indirect reference of accepting bribes. Now an example of indirect reference can be prosecution of officials in the coal scam, where officials gave lease to such companies who they knew were not eligible. On the issue of taking prior consent from the government, the petitioners have argued that it takes away the element of secrecy and surprise, but also introduces a period of delay with respect to the investigation. And it is in this period of delay where vital evidence can be manipulated or destroyed. The petitioners further argued that this delay further gives time to the accused to lobby in the echelons of power for denial of such permission. Now, as for the petitioner, seeking of this prior permission from the government itself becomes a cause of corruption, because it introduces the concept of discretion at certain powerful hands at the most crucial stage of commencement of investigation. So after hearing the arguments from the petitioner, the Supreme Court has finally agreed and in this aspect has ordered the central government to respond within 6 weeks. So in this analysis, these arguments presented by the petitioner becomes important as it forms a part of critical analysis of the recent amendments proposed to this Prevention of Corruption Act 1988. So after going through this analysis, this forms your practice question for your mains examination. It says, critically analyze the recent amendments proposed in the Prevention of Corruption Act 1988. I'm sure after going through this analysis, you can include all these points in your answer writing, specifically with respect to this concept of prior consent as well as removal of this provision on criminal misconduct. So in this aspect, this particular news on Prevention of Corruption Act 1988 becomes important. Since this particular case is sub judice, so let's wait for the response given by the central government and the final hearing by the Honorable Supreme Court of India. With this, let's move on to the next news. The next news appears on page number 18. The news reads, NASA's InSight rover heats for 6.5 minutes of terror in its first bid to touch down the red planets since the Curiosity rover landed in 2012. Now this news on NASA's InSight rover forms a part of general science in your prelims examination. Now this particular news is with respect to NASA's Mars InSight mission. So what is this InSight spacecraft of NASA? InSight refers to interior exploration using seismic investigation, geodesy and heat transport. And this InSight is a Mars lander designed by NASA. So this becomes a crucial information with respect to your prelims examination, that this Mars lander InSight has been designed by NASA. And this has been done to study in depth about the inner space of Mars, which includes the crust, the mantle as well as the core of planet Mars. Further, this InSight rover would also measure tectonic activity and meteorite impacts on the planet of Mars. Again, these two information with respect to InSight rover becomes critically important from our exam perspective, that it aims to measure tectonic activity and also the impact of meteorite on the planet Mars. So the question arises that why all these missions are sent to the planet Mars. It mentions that as compared to other planets, Mars is neither too big or too small. Further, it also preserves the record of its formation, and this record can give us an insight about the terrestrial formation of the planet Mars and forms a sort of a perfect laboratory from where we can study about the evolution as well as formation of this rocky planet, that is Mars. So these missions helps us in having a better understanding about the evolution as well as the formation of the rocky planets. So in this aspect, it becomes important to know about the goals of this InSight mission by NASA. Thus, as you can see, the goals of this InSight mission is to understand formation and evolution on Mars and also to determine the level of tectonic activity taking place on Mars. Thus, to understand how these planets are formed, InSight will study the interior structure and processes of Mars by determining the following: by knowing the size of the core, what it is made of, and whether it is liquid or solid. So this InSight will have a proper and comprehensive study about the core of Mars, and also in the process will try to know the content of the core of Mars. Further, the thickness as well as structure of the crust of Mars. Then it will also try to find out about the structure of the mantle and what it is made of. Further, it will also try to find out how warm the interior of Mars is and how much heat is still flowing through the planet. So all these information will help us in having a better understanding about the core, crust as well as mantle of Mars. As mentioned, that this mission will also find out about the tectonic activity taking place on Mars. And in this aspect, it will also try to find out that how powerful and frequent internal seismic activity have been taking place on Mars. So it will also try to understand and find out about the internal seismic activity taking place on Mars, and also try to locate where these tectonic activities are taking place. Further, we will also try to understand the impact of meteorites on the surface of Mars. Now, some of the important instruments used by the InSight rovers are seismometer to measure tectonic activity, heat flow probe, and radio science experiment. Further, the heat flow probe will investigate how much heat is still flowing out of Mars, and its observation will help us in understanding whether Earth and Mars are made of the same stuff, and in the process will provide more information about the red planet. Further, the insight will also help in checking the planet's reflexes. It says that like Earth, Mars also wobbles a little as it rotates around its axis. So this InSight rover will also help in finding out how much Mars wobbles around its axis. And to study this, two radio antennas, part of RISE instrument, track the location of lander very precisely. Now this RISE instrument refers to Rotation and Interior Structure Experiment, and RISE helps us in understanding the reflex of planet Mars. It further tells us where exactly Mars is in space and how much the planet wobbles around its orbit. Further, this information will help us in knowing about the size of Mars' core as well as help us to determine whether the core is made of liquid or solid. So in this aspect, this RISE instrument plays a great role. Now after this discussion, you must be thinking that how these informations get back to us on Earth. So on this aspect, it's important to note that NASA's InSight mission uses the NASA's Deep Space Network, that is DSN, which is an international network of antennas that provides communication links between planetary exploration spacecraft and their mission teams on Earth. So basically there is an antenna on Earth which receives this information from exploration spacecrafts in outer space. Now this deep space network consists of three deep space communication complexes placed 120 degrees apart around this world. The first one is in California at Goldstone. The second is near Madrid in Spain, and the third is near Canberra in Australia. And all these three deep space networks had been placed apart at 120 degrees. So in this news analysis, all these information with respect to InSight spacecraft of NASA becomes extremely important for us to remember from our prelims perspective. Now these two forms your practice question. What you can do is to take a pause of 5 seconds. Now coming back to this first practice question, it says, consider the following statements about Mars InSight mission. First, it has been designed by NASA and European Space Agency. No, European Space Agency is not involved. So the first statement becomes incorrect. Second, it will study the crust, mantle and core of Mars. Yes, this statement is correct. Third, it will measure seismic activities taking place on Mars. Yes, this is also correct, as we have discussed in detail about Mars InSight mission. So in this, C becomes our correct answer, that is 2 and 3 statements are correct. Now in the second question, it asks, consider the following statements about NASA's Deep Space Network. First, it provides communication links with planetary exploration spacecraft back on Earth. Yes, this statement is correct. Second, it consists of 3 deep space communication complexes placed 150 degrees apart. No, this statement is incorrect, as we have seen that these are placed 120 degrees apart in California, Madrid and Canberra. So in this particular question, A becomes a correct answer. So we understand that after going through these analysis, it becomes easier to solve these kind of prelims based questions. So in this aspect, this news on NASA's InSight rover becomes extremely important for us to understand from our prelims perspective, as questions can be expected in the upcoming prelims examination of 2019. With this, let's move on to the next news. This article appears on page number 9. It's about legacies crucial for commons, why Gandhi and Marx are more relevant now than ever before. This article highlights about the ideologies of Karl Marx and Mahatma Gandhi and how these ideologies are helping the people at grassroots level. Now various questions have been asked in the Indian history on Mahatma Gandhi. So in this aspect, in your prelims examination, this topic forms a part of History of India and National Movement, and your mains examination, it forms a part of GS1 under Modern History as well as Freedom Struggle. So as mentioned, these are the various questions which have been asked in different years specifically on Mahatma Gandhi. Very recently in 2018, this question was asked, throw light on significance of the thoughts of Mahatma Gandhi in the present times. Further, in 2015, this question was asked which mentioned how different would have been the achievement of Indian independence without Mahatma Gandhi. Discuss. Again in 2016, the question asked was highlight the differences in approach of Subhash Chandra Bose and Mahatma Gandhi in the struggle for freedom. So we understand that since Mahatma Gandhi had a very important role to play in our national freedom struggle, hence questions have been asked previously by the UPSC. Further, even questions in essays have been asked in the year 2013 as well as in 2012. In 13, the question was, be the change you want to see in others. And in 2012, it said that in the context of Gandhiji's views on matter, explore on an evolutionary scale the terms Swadhinta, Swaraj and Dharmaraj, and also critically comment on their contemporary relevance to Indian democracy. So, contemporary relevance of ideologies of Mahatma Gandhi has become very important, specifically with respect to the Indian democracy. Thus, we understand that contemporary relevance of these ideologies becomes extremely important as to how these ideologies are currently shaping up and how it has an impact on the development of India. On this aspect, let us understand what the author has to say on the combined ideologies of both Mahatma Gandhi and Karl Marx and how it is helping the society at the grassroots level. So, both Mahatma Gandhi as well as Karl Marx have been one of the greatest thinkers of our time. And extensive research has also been taken place on their ideologies and its impact on different sections of the society. Further, this article highlights about Sangharsh as well as Nirman, that is, resistance or struggle, as well as construction of an alternative ideologies which is constantly shaping up in the society. For example, Adivasis, farmers, fisherpersons, pastoralists are all struggling for their rights with respect to land, forest produce, as well as water. Further, rallies and protests have been organized by these farmers who are demanding loan waiver as well as better pricing output for their agricultural produce from their respective governments. So all these are an example of combined ideologies of Mahatma Gandhi as well as Karl Marx. This article further highlights about Nirman, that is, construction of an alternatives taking place at the grassroots level. The article mentions that across the world there are a number of examples with respect to an alternative way of development, such as sustainable and holistic agriculture, community-led initiative with respect to water, energy, as well as food security, takeover of production facilities by the workers, as well as community participation in different aspects of society, such as local governance, and in India aided by Panchayati Raj, which was always a dream of Mahatma Gandhi, building of community health centers and centers for alternative learning, reassertion of cultural diversity as well as sexual pluralism, and inter-community peace building process, which is very essential for peace to sustain at grassroots level. Thus, as per the author, he finds in most of these alternative movements inspiration both from Mahatma Gandhi as well as Karl Marx. So through these examples, the author highlights exploration of autonomy, self-reliance, people's governance of politics and economy, and the most important, respect for nature. Thus, what the author highlights is that these alternatives are combined ideals of both Karl Marx and Mahatma Gandhi as highlighted through these alternative movements at grassroots level. Thus, all these alternative movements encompasses Karl Marx's vision of a society that bridges humanity's rift with nature and Gandhiji's repeated emphasis on living lightly on earth. Thus, the society in reflection of ideas from both the world also challenge the very fundamentals and meanings of development, especially its over-reliance on economic growth. And in this aspect, the society also challenges the reliance on ever-increasing production and consumption as well as utter disregard for inequality. Thus, the author highlights that there may be enough differences between the two, that is Mahatma Gandhi and Karl Marx, but there are more than enough common grounds to achieve well-being, justice, and equity based on ecological wisdom. Thus, this article highlights that how the common grounds between Mahatma Gandhi and Karl Marx and their ideals are helping a construction of alternatives at the grassroots level. Now, various questions have been asked by UPSC on Mahatma Gandhi in different prelims examination. Let's go through some of these questions. In 2009, this question was asked, which of the following founded Ahmedabad Textile Labour Association? The correct answer here was Mahatma Gandhi. Then in 2010 the question was, for the Karachi session of Indian National Congress in 1931, presided over by Sardar Patel, who drafted the resolution on fundamental rights and economic program? One of the options was also Mahatma Gandhi, but in this the correct answer was Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. Further, this question was again asked in the year 2010. Who among the following were official Congress negotiators with Cripps mission? One of the option in which was Mahatma Gandhi and Sardar Patel. However, in this the correct answer was Pandit Nehru and Maulana Azad. Further, again in 2010, the question asked was, consider the following statements. Dr. Rajendra Prasad persuaded Mahatma Gandhi to come to Champaran to investigate the problems of peasants. Second, Acharya J.B. Kriplani was one of Mahatma Gandhi's colleague in his Champaran investigation. Which of the statements given above is correct? Here, second statement is correct, whereas first statement is incorrect, because it was not Rajendra Prasad who persuaded Mahatma Gandhi, but it was Rajkumar Shukla. So in this, B becomes the correct answer. Now you can take these next three questions as your practice question. This could be your practice question number 1, practice question number 2, and this one, practice question number 3. Let's see these three questions after a pause. Now this question was asked in the year 2011 by the UPSC prelims examination. The question was, Mahatma Gandhi said that some of his deepest convictions were reflected in a book titled Unto This Last, and the book transformed his life. What was the message from the book that transformed Mahatma Gandhi? Now this question was very important as it was talking about the concept of Sarvodaya. And in this, the correct answer was B, that is, good of individual is contained in good of all, which was the correct answer. Further, in 2011, another question was asked. What was the reason for Mahatma Gandhi to organize a satyagraha on behalf of peasants of Kheda? First, the administration did not suspend the land revenue collection in spite of drought. Yes, this statement is correct. Second, the administration proposed to introduce permanent settlement in Gujarat. No, this statement is not correct as there was no issue with respect to permanent settlement. So in this, A becomes our correct answer. Further, this question was asked in the year 2012. It says, Mahatma Gandhi undertook and fast unto death in 1932, mainly because of A. Round Table Conference failed to satisfy Indian political aspirations. No. B. Congress and Muslim League had differences of opinion. No. C. Ramsay MacDonald announced a communal award. Yes, this is the correct answer. So in this, C becomes our correct answer. So we see that various questions in prelims as well as mains examinations have been asked on Mahatma Gandhi. Thus, the role of Mahatma Gandhi in our national freedom struggle becomes critically important, and also for us to understand from an exam perspective. As we have seen, questions have been asked in prelims, mains as well as the essays. So in this context, this article becomes extremely significant. With this, let's move on to the next news. The next news appears on page number 7. The news reads, Incredible India handle goofs upon Tawang Monastery. Now in this news, various monasteries and their locations becomes important from a prelims perspective, as questions have been asked on the location of such monasteries in the year 2014. So let's go through the location of different monasteries which are important with respect to our UPSC syllabus. In your prelims examination, this topic forms a part of history and culture. You can see a list which mentions about state and the different monasteries. So Hemis Monastery. We have already mentioned about Hemis Monastery in detail, which is in Ladakh, in our previous DNS videos. So both these Hemis and Thiske monasteries are in Ladakh. In Leh there is Dikshit Monastery and Futkal Monastery. These monasteries are located in Himachal Pradesh. They are Palpung Shirabling, which is in the Kangra Valley, Gondola Monastery, where the Chandra and the Bhaga river meets, which is one of the oldest and most holy monasteries in India and also in the world. Key Monastery, which is in Spiti. Further, Suglakhang Monastery, which is in Dharmshala, and this is the official residence of Dalai Lama. Hence, this monastery becomes extremely important to remember from your prelims perspective. Then we have Tabo Monastery, and it was on this Tabo Monastery that the question was asked in the year 2014 prelims examination. Then we move to the state of Sikkim. We have Gonjang Monastery, Rumtek Monastery, Lenche Monastery, and it mentions that the festival Singhe Cham signifies peace between Bhutia and Lepcha. Further in Karnataka, we have Namdroling Ning Mapa Monastery, In Arunachal Pradesh, we have the Tawang Monastery. In Uttarakhand, we have Mindroling Monastery. And in West Bengal, we have the Ghum Monastery. So these are some of the important monasteries and the state in which they are located. Now coming to the question asked in the year 2014 UPSC prelims examination. The question reads, with reference to Buddhist history, tradition and culture in India, consider the following pairs, famous shrine and their location. First, Tabo Monastery and Temple Complex, location Spiti Valley. Lotsawa Lakhang Temple, Nako, in Zanskar Valley. Third, Alchi Temple Complex in Ladakh. The question is, which of the following pairs given above is are correctly matched? In this, C is the correct answer, that is 1 and 3 is correctly matched, whereas second is incorrectly matched. In the second option, that is Lotsawa Lakhang Temple Nako is situated in the Kinnaur district in Himachal Pradesh. So second option is incorrect. So in this, C become a correct answer. So we understand that monasteries and their locations becomes extremely important with respect to our UPSC prelims examination. With this, let's move on to the next news. The next article appears on page number 9. It reads, Rules for a Resolution. Ajit Doval's visit to China presents an opportunity to take stock of the boundary question. So as per this article, Ajit Doval, who is India's National Security Advisor, has gone to meet special representatives in China for 21st edition of Special Representation Talks. The expected aspects of talks is intended to revolve around the boundary dispute resolution between India and China. So in this aspect, let us understand about India's boundary dispute with China. Now this topic forms a part of GS paper 2 under India and its neighborhood relations. Now this topic of boundary dispute between India and China was extensively covered by Ankur sir in May 2018 edition of the Focus magazine. So let's try and find out what Ankur sir has provided with respect to border dispute between India and China. As you can see in this map, there are three areas where we have boundary dispute with China. One is the western sector, second is the middle sector, and third is around the eastern sector, that is around the states of Arunachal Pradesh and Sikkim, where recently we had a standoff with the Chinese army in Doklam. In the western sector, it says that with around 2150 kilometers of border, the two sides differ over boundary line that separates Jammu and Kashmir from Xinjiang province of China. So this becomes an important information. In this aspect, India accuses China of illegally occupying Aksai Chin. So this is one area of tension between India and China with respect to the western sector. Now around the middle sector shared between Himachal Pradesh and Uttarakhand, it says that a 625 kilometer border in this sector are least controversial of the three, as both sides do not have much disagreement over this area. So of the three, this is the least concerned area, or this area is one of the least disagreed area with respect to boundary disputes. Further in the eastern sector, which covered mostly of Arunachal Pradesh and part of Sikkim, it says the 1140 kilometer long boundary is contentious and is historically referred to as McMahon line. Now this becomes an extremely important information from your prelims point of view. And this McMahon line is not accepted by China, as the McMahon line was agreed by Tibetan representatives, which is not accepted to China. So China claims the whole of Arunachal Pradesh, that is around 85,000 square kilometer, as its own territory. And this is one of the most contentious issue between India and China. On this aspect, the two sides, that India and China, have fought fierce battle in 1962, but a better prepared Chinese had the advantage, as we all know. So the sticking point between China and India is that India and China have a total boundary of around 4050 km, which is divided into three sectors, which we just saw. The states of Jammu and Kashmir, Uttarakhand, Himachal Pradesh, Sikkim and Arunachal Pradesh share their borders with China with respect to the disputed boundaries. So in this aspect, these disputes on the western sector, middle sector as well as the eastern sector becomes important from your prelims perspective. This particular news as of now is in transition. So let's wait and watch for the 21st edition of Special Representative Talks to get over. With this, we come to an end to discussion of today's newspaper. Let's move on to the question for the day.